Gunakene Gunasya Tapaha Ruto Devadashana Javacha Brahmana Chorito Brahman Gunakene Gunasya Yasmay Narado Devadashana. Word for word, Raja, the king, Uvaja, inquired, Brahmana, why Lord Brahma? Choditaha, being instructed, Brahman, O learned Brahmana, Shukadeva Goswami, Guna Akhyane, in narrating the transcendental qualities, Agunasya, of the Lord, who is without material qualities, Cha, and Yasmai, and whom, Yatha, as much as, Praha, explained, Narada Muni, Devadarshanaha, one whose audience is as good as that of any demigod. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhaya and the Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami, how did Narad Muni, whose hearers are as fortunate as those instructed by Lord Brahma, explain the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is without material qualities, and before whom did he speak? Purport. Devarshi Narad was directly instructed by Brahmaji, who was also directly instructed by the Supreme Lord, and therefore the instructions imparted by Narada to his various disciples are as good as those of the Supreme Lord. That is the way of understanding Vedic knowledge. It comes down from the Lord by disciplic succession, and this transcendental knowledge is distributed to the world by this descending process. There is no chance, however, to receive the Vedic knowledge from mental speculators. Therefore, wherever Narad Muni goes, he represents himself as authorized by the Lord, and his appearance is as good as that of the Supreme Lord. Similarly, this disciplic succession which strictly follows the transcendental instruction is the bona fide chain of disciplic succession, and the test for such bona fide spiritual masters is that there should be no difference between the instruction of the Lord originally imparted to his devotee and that which is imparted by the authority in the line of disciplic succession. How Narad Muni distributed the transcendental knowledge of the Lord will be explained in later cantos. It will appear also that the Lord existed prior to the material creation, and therefore his transcendental name, quality, etc. do not represent any material quality. Whenever, therefore, the Lord is described as aguna, or without any quality, it does not mean that he has no quality, but that he has no material quality, such as the modes of goodness, passion, or ignorance, as the conditioned souls have. He is transcendental to all material conceptions, and thus he is described as aguna. Om Jnanatimrandasya Grananjana Shalakaya Chikshurunmilitam Vyena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadate Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttaparkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachedvam Sadvitam Savadutam Parechana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamame Hare Priye Vancha Kalpadarubhascha Kripa Sindhyubha Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we are starting a new chapter today. And so in the last several verses we concluded the previous chapter, which was called Shadow Incarnations, so where Lord Brahma mentioned many of the famous incarnations of the Lord, after previously having described his the Lord in relation to the material energy in like creation, and so after that then he went on to so in other words, before he described the Purusha avatars and Guna avatars, and then he went on in this chapter to describe the Lord's Lila avatars and how the Lord comes personally in his different incarnations, different forms, and rescues the devotees, shows his mercies to the devotees, and kills the demons. And and after telling these, then we heard Lord Brahma warning again then that even now, after hearing all of that from me, still don't ever think that you have figured out that you understand the Lord, but rather it's absolutely impossible to really fully understand the Lord, even for someone like me, even for, what to speak of me, him being the greatest living Jiva, the living being in this universe, even Anantashesh, an incarnation of the Lord with his innumerable hoods reciting the glories since time immemorial, is still not able to finish reciting the glories of the Lord, as we famously know. So, what to speak of us ever thinking that we could understand the Lord fully. And so after that, then Lord Brahma went on to tell Narad Muni that now that I've told you all of that, and he also told, I myself, I received this knowledge just in a few verses actually from the Lord, which we hear later then in just a chapter after this, I think, which chapter 9, where there's the famous Chatushloki then of the Bhagavatam, which is called Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. That's where we learn how Garbhodakashaya Vishnu instructed personally Lord Brahma. And so he himself got it in very concise way, just a few verses, but but Lord Brahma, being the most intelligent living being in this universe, expanded on it, as we heard here, to Narad Muni in those last few chapters, and he again requested Narad Muni that now that you have understood all of that, you can expand on that further and describe it to all the other Achivas, because after all we know Narad Muni, he's the most famous preacher, so that's his very birth, which is rather, his last birth is not a material birth, but it's simply a appearance of a Mahabharat, of a pure devotee, empowered personally by the Lord with the bhakti shakti with the power to give devotional service to so many other jivas. So, and he was instructed that personally by Lord Brahma as well to do that. And so in today's verse, then we hear Maharaj Parikshit inquiring from Shukadeva Goswami that now, how did Narad Muni do that? And he also mentions from relating to Narad Muni that some of his glories by saying that how did Narad Muni, whose hearers are as fortunate as those instructed by Lord Brahma, explain the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is without material qualities, and before whom did he speak? So, And Srila Prabhupada expands on that point that those hearers of, in that case of Narad Muni, are as fortunate as those who got directly instructed by Lord Brahma, which in this case was Narad Muni himself. And Prabhupada further tells, and in the same way as Lord Brahma himself being instructed by the Lord, that there's so many times Prabhupada mentions this and tries to make us understand that we should never think that directly one-to-one being with the Lord, hearing the Lord, seeing the Lord, serving the Lord, that is in any way superior to getting the knowledge through the parampara, through the disciplic succession. Even though from a material perspective it might seem like, how can this still be perfect? There's like so many different acharyas and so much time in between from when the Lord spoke it to how when we receive it, that we would always tend to think that is inferior to, whereas if we would be one-on-one, the Lord, imagine like you stand here and Gopinath would speak to you the Bhagavad Gita, then we would think, oh wow, that's much greater. But actually Prabhupada so many times he tells us, no, it's not greater at all. It's completely the same. And we know in one sense even we, especially as fallen souls like us, we desperately need the mercy of all the devotees. So it's even greater actually to receive the knowledge by devotees, because then we receive their mercy as well if we submissively hear and then also engage in their service. And also they are able to explain it to us in a way that we actually understand it, because we are not qualified to directly hear from the Lord anyway, to understand this transcendental knowledge. We are like small baby birds who need the mother to put the grains into directly in our mouth. So that's what the acharyas, especially Srila Prabhupada, are doing for us, and our spiritual masters and the other senior devotees who are guiding us. So that's how dependent we are to even be able to get some proper understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai. Perfect timing. And so it's a great mercy to get the knowledge through the disciplic succession. And Prabhupada, one point he mentions here in terms of how do we know if it's bona fide, and he says that the test for such bona fide spiritual masters is that there should be no difference between the instruction of the Lord originally imparted to his devotee and that which is imparted by the authorities in the line of disciplic succession. And that we see so perfectly, of course, in the case of Srila Prabhupada, that he not only perfectly repeats, but even in topics where it might seem going a bit more in not so much directly to devotional service to bhakti yoga, but more on side points relating to it, giving us the understanding in the Shastras. Rather, Srila Prabhupada, he always makes directly the link to bhakti yoga as well, because he knows how limited our intelligence is, especially now, and how limited our time is in this short lifespan. And many of us even come then in contact with devotees and come to Krishna consciousness only later in our lives. So there's so little time left for us to make our life perfect by developing our Krishna consciousness. So that's why Srila Prabhupada, he, like we see that in Bhagavad Gita, for example, right from the start, he always gives us the ultimate conclusion of getting the connection, of still getting the message that Krishna is telling there. Also like about karma yoga and jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga, but he always relates it directly to bhakti yoga, that we don't waste time in just trying get too much technical knowledge and seeing it as separate from bhakti yoga, and that is not something made up or anything, but rather that's like a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, he perfectly understands the heart of the Lord. He knows why Krishna is telling all of that. He knows his ultimate purpose, and so by him presenting it in a way that we always get the maximum benefit of understanding devotional service and getting the inspiration to do devotional service. So that's a great service. It's not at all against the words of Krishna. And so that's the mercy of the disciplic succession. And then in the last part of the purport, Prabhupada mentions about this word that's another glorification that Maharaj Parikshit puts in the words in regard to the Lord himself, is that the Lord is described as Nirguna or Aguna. The Aguna is used here. Sometimes Nirguna, Aguna is the same. Both mean that he is free from the gunas, from the material modes, from any material qualities. And we know Mayavadis, they like to take those kinds of words as a so-called evidence that there is no personality ultimately, that because it says the Lord is Aguna, Nirguna, he doesn't have any qualities, so it's just formless, impersonal Brahman without any variegatedness. So that's how they interpret it. But we know, of course, again, by the Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ke Jai. Again, by the mercy of the acharyas, the disciplic succession, that not at all means that the Lord doesn't have qualities, that there is no actual supreme person, but simply it means that the Lord is in no way ever has anything to do with the inferior energy, with the external energy that he simply employs to give the jivas, living entities like us, simply the facility to actually execute our free will, and in that case, if we choose to misuse it, for that we associate with the material energy, and thus in our illusory identity take on material qualities, and by misidentifying with the material body, with the material mind, intelligence, false ego. But that can only happen for jivas and could never happen with the Supreme Lord, of course, because after all, he's unlimitedly full of all energies, and material energy is simply his inferior energy, so it doesn't even stand in any way near to his internal energy, in which he, of course, acts all the time, and in which he manifests himself and the spiritual world. And so that's about that. The Lord is Aguna, and so sorry, I wasn't prepared for the class, so quickly check. And so in terms of that the Lord never can have anything to do with the material energy, but still having qualities. I read recently now in the third canto, beginning the instructions of Lord Kapiladev, so the Lord incarnating as the son of Devahuti and Kadama Muni, in order to explain the Sankhya Yoga, especially first of all the understanding the Lord in regard to the material energy, by understanding material nature itself, all the different elements and how they come about, how they interact, and then ultimately how everything still depends on the Lord, and how to again connect with the Lord, of course, then in Bhakti Yoga. So, and he starts off with the 25th chapter about with the glories of the devotional service, and there he, in one verse, he describes where he actually, if I remember correctly, that's where he, after telling the different elements, he describes how, like, the main functions of those elements. And when it comes to the element earth, he specifically mentions as the first thing, actually, that one most significant thing about the earth element, which of course we know is part of the inferior energy of the material energy, but yet by the Lord's mercy we know that he still uses this same earth element also to manifest himself personally as the Archa Vigraha, like here as Sri Sri Radha Gopinath. And that's an amazing purport actually there, of that, where Srila Prabhupada really beautifully explains on how to understand the Archa Vigraha and how on the Lord's mercy and how to relate to it and everything. And Lord Kapila himself mentions also that so that the devotees does see the Lord's smiling face and all his different forms, because we know even as Archa Vigraha the Lord comes as so many different forms, and like there's so many temples, especially in India, of course, and of many different forms of Krishna himself, and then of many other incarnations. And but all those are so Lord Kapila mentions, and all those forms, they are all benevolent, and also that the Lord also in this Archa Vigraha, that he talks favorably. That Lord Kapila Dev is saying that actually in regard the devotee relating to him, he's saying that, and they talk favorably with me, because he himself is the Lord, so he's speaking. And Prabhupada explains there that first of all, that going back to accepting the concept, understanding that actually there is something like an Archa Vigraha, that the Lord personally can also show himself as apparently the inferior energy, and then through the earth element. Like one point Prabhupada makes there is like we, like people that we thinking like because on the one hand people challenge who are not ready to take the bhakti, atheists, that they like, why should I believe in God? Why should I follow God? Where is God? Show me God. This kind of challenging attitude. But then on the other hand, then when we say God is so merciful and appears in the Archa Vigraha, then they don't believe. Then that's just a statue. Like how could it be that God is here? So, and Prabhupada explains that. So, first of all, like we are not even able to see this the tiny jiva, the spirit soul, ourselves, or you and me. We're not with our material eyes. We'll never be able to even see the tiny spark of the Supreme Lord, the jiva. So what to speak then of? Why would we expect to be qualified with our contaminated eyes, contaminated consciousness, to see the Supreme Lord Himself? So thus it is necessary for those who are a bit sincere, ready to again want to see the Lord and want to connect with Him in Bhakti Yoga. So that's why the Lord is so merciful and does accept this Archa Vigraha. And in other words, Prabhupada mentioned, so the Supreme Personality of God accepts a favorable form, the Archa Vigraha. So it's a favor by the Lord that He accepts such a form which is favorable for our currently contaminated senses to also be able to see Him and stand before him and speak with him, like Kapiladiv says here. It's not even only for our eyes, but we know it's. I mean, we are so much attached also to live our lives according to what we see. We're visually guided. So if we see someone right before us, then it's much easier for us also to speak to him and to pour our heart out. So the Lord is also ready here, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, to always hear us as well. Either out loud, or of course he's also able to simply when we pray in our mind. And yeah, so that's how merciful the Lord is. And as in Lord Kapiladiv mentions here, that all those deity forms, they are very benevolent. So as soon as we come before the Lord, we become objects of their mercy. And so Prabhupada mentions here further that so the devotees, they spiritually enjoy the form of the Lord, Yacha Vigraha, because all of the deities are benevolent. So that's the huge difference between atheists and devotees. Or we know even many who are not fully devotees, but who are still many people are fortunate enough, at least, that they have faith in the Yacha Vigraha, and thus they benefit, even at least for the material life, if they're not interested in spiritual life, like many people still go to temples and take the blessings of the Lord, which is at least some starting point. And because the Lord, he personally comes so mercifully in this form to give us his mercy. And we are almost on time. One point I think the other day about when we recently heard a lot about chanting the holy name, and also in regard to this, that we are not even able to see our spirit soul like that. That we, even as devotees, we might have some realization that we are not this gross body, but which even that is very difficult. But then, especially to realize that we are not the mind is even much more difficult. And like one devotee I remember mentioned to Anantapur recently, and when at that time, then I was thinking, like one point how we understand that we haven't realized it much is that, especially during japa, if we actually would have realized that we are not this mind, this contaminated mind, then why would we allow to listen to the mind instead of the holy name when we chant the Lord's name? And so, but at the same, still, then like we might think many times, I don't have taste, I haven't realized that the holy name is non-different from Krishna, from Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. But some realization we definitely do have, and like one way to see that is if we consider that definitely we all have some experience in our devotional life where we feel bliss. That's otherwise we wouldn't be able to be here. It's param drishtva nivartate. Some of it we realized. That's how we were able to give up the bad material habits, and we know it in our heart. We can clearly, distinctly feel the difference of getting happiness from chanting or from seeing Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, singing for Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, engaging in devotional service, rather than from the flickering pleasure that we get from sense gratification. So and in that way we can also, having realized to some extent that the holy name and Gopinath, that they are non-different, because it's the same spiritual bliss that we feel when we attentively chant, or when we are in kirtan, or when we see Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, is completely distinct from sense gratification. So definitely we have some realization, and we should be grateful for that, and not despondent, and try to always go deeper in our chanting and in our devotional service. Okay, so we're in time now. Thank you for your attention. Grantarachima Bhagavatam Ki Jai.